about one of my favorite subjects, which is the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. I am, having come from working at the UN with Maggie and others on Ambassador Haley's team, and after of working on human rights, the Women, Peace, and Security agenda is something that's really close to my heart. I've seen the impact that it makes in conflict zones and fragile states around the world, and I've seen how women, especially peace activists in countries that are experiencing conflict and fragility, look to the agenda that has been set by UNSCR 1325 as the lodestar for their work and empowering what they do to try to get themselves heard at peace talks and to work in their communities to build peace and to build security, true security that's sustainable and resilient and really protects the population. So it's something that we care about a great deal here in my office, and that we're working across the State Department and with the rest of our foreign policy and national security colleagues to implement across the United States government's infrastructure for dealing with national security and foreign policy issues. And we have been very fortunate in this administration to have some great new tools to do that. In 2017, President Trump signed the Women, Peace, and Security Act, which was passed by a massive bipartisan majority in both houses of Congress, and which, for the first time in or any country in the world, enshrined the Women, Peace, and Security agenda into U.S. law. And we remain the only country that has actually passed legislation at the national level to enshrine the Women, Peace, and Security agenda into law. And we are really proud of the work that we're doing across those priorities. And I think that we've continued to develop it through a national strategy that came out last year. And then earlier this year, the State Department, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and our Department of Homeland Security produced implementation plans that we're using to track our progress against the strategy and against the legislation. So we're very fortunate to have a strong bipartisan base of support for the work that we're doing on women, peace, and security, and to be able to rely on great partners across our interagency to actually carry out this work. Here at the State Department, we're uniquely positioned to do women, peace, and security work in 4 key areas: in policy, diplomacy, partnerships, and innovative programs. Through our global presence, we have more than 300 embassies, consulates, and diplomatic missions around the world, and tens of thousands of personnel here in Washington and overseas who are brought into the effort to implement our women, peace, and security agenda. We currently are operating in 30 specific countries in conjunction with 10 regional and international organizations on very specific women, peace, and security agendas. But we have across the State Department commitments at the office, bureau, and post level to carry out dozens more activities in more contexts. So we continue to grow this work every day. It's not something that we do alone either, not just through our diplomacy, but also through our partnerships. Our partnerships with other countries are absolutely critical. We work really hard, especially with both our allies who have made a strong commitment to women, peace, and security, as well as emerging partners who are looking to develop their own capabilities, to improve their training, to improve their recruitment and retention of women into their armed forces, and to help develop the skills and the capabilities in their own societies to ensure that women's voices are heard. We work with civil society, we work with governments and militaries around the world on these things, and it's really great. We have so much demand from partners around the world to work with them on women, peace, and security that we can hardly keep up with it. And we do this through everything from our global peacekeeping operations training center, where we work with our colleagues in the Department of Defense to help make sure that countries that are deploying troops into peacekeeping contexts have the right training, and the women, peace, and security agenda is part of that curriculum. And we do it in peace talks from Afghanistan to Burma, to other places around the world, where we work to help support women who are engaged in these processes. And it's really it's really been an important area for us also as we look to push back on the malign influence that certain countries around the world are using to expand their power and to undermine the rights of women and girls around the world. And I think specifically of Iran, a country that it's not enough for them to torment the women and the people of their own society with their cruel theocratic rule, the mullahs there, but they continue to export their ideology and instability around the region, from Yemen to Iraq to Syria to Afghanistan and other places, where when you see women who are suffering, who are facing challenges, there is a hidden hand of Iranian influence at work there that's making these societies less hospitable to women and women's rights. So we continue to see the Women, Peace, and Security agenda as a strategic imperative to help us address challenges such as this. We're also seeing right now through our Women, Peace, and Security work the disproportionate impact that the COVID-19 pandemic is having on women and girls around the world, especially those in fragile and conflict-affected states. And we're seeing things like significant spikes in gender-based violence, job loss, and increasing instability and insecurity in places such as South Sudan and other locations around the world where women are going to be made more vulnerable because of state failure or the incapacity of states to address challenges like this. This is one reason why our Women, Peace, and Security efforts work hand in glove with something else that Congress passed with a huge bipartisan majority, the Global Fragility Act, which is aimed at making sure that we're working in fragile and conflict-affected spaces to address these concerns and try to get ahead of them through preventive efforts. And we're working really hard to align our Women, Peace, and Security agenda and the Global Fragility Act strategy that we're working on here to make sure that we're doing that, just that. So in these contexts where we're seeing women already at risk from conflict, we see that the measures that have been taken in some cases to address COVID have put women at greater risk. So we're engaging with civil society groups. In particular, this is a big part of our work here on Women, Peace, and Security, is to work with local women's organizations and to work with grassroots organizations and civil society in countries around the world to help make sure that women have access to services, that they have access to judicial processes, and that the authorities in these countries are taking steps to ensure that women are not subjected to additional pressures and violence as a result of whether it's a conflict or the COVID lockdowns that so many of us have had to deal with. But we really are excited about the opportunities, in addition to our bilateral engagement with partners, about how we work through the multilateral space. As your dean mentioned, the Women, Peace, and Security agenda really came into its own as a result of Security Council Resolution 1325 in the Security Council. And we continue to work through multilateral partners such as the UN and regional partners, whether it's with NATO or some of our other regional alliances, to help implement this agenda. We're working with countries around the world on their national action plans that are at the country level to help them develop and implement those plans. And I can think of examples like Colombia, where we've been working with the government in Colombia as part of the peace process that the United States has been very much involved in, to help them with the development and implementation of their national action plan on women, peace, and security, alongside the implementation of the peace process in Colombia, which featured a very strong women, peace, and security component from the beginning, and which has been key to the implementation of that peace process. So we know that through sustained engagement, whether it's with the United Nations or directly with our partners, we're able to make a difference and help support women as they work to make their voices heard. We also know that by doing these things, we help make sure that peace processes, agreements that are reached, whether it's at the local or national level, that they are more resilient and more sustainable and more likely to be successful over time. All of the research shows that when women are involved in peace processes, the resulting negotiations and agreements are more durable and more sustainable. They're more successful. They're more likely to address a broader range of issues because women bring different issues and perspectives to the table, and it's really important to ensure their participation. We are also working to increase the number of women peacekeepers on the ground so that peacekeeping missions can be more responsive and more effective, and working with our partners who make up the majority of troop contributing countries on everything from recruitment to training, as I mentioned before. And we're really working on that goal by helping countries to remove barriers that they may have in place, as well as to increase their training and opportunities for women. We're also working through regional organizations like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. We worked with the African Union. We work with the OSCE, or the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. These are all great partners of ours. We've even started recently an engagement with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation because so many of the members of the OIC are so enthusiastic about the Women, Peace, and Security agenda and want to work with us on that. So we're really excited about some of these non-traditional partners that we're working with on women, peace, and security. We really are thinking that that there is a lot more that we can do in this space, but one of our most important imperatives is to make sure that our own house is in order and that we are addressing the needs of our staff here at the State Department and our personnel who are involved in diplomacy. So we very much focused on internal training, on making sure that our that gender analysis and gender perspectives are embedded in our programs here at the State Department and at USAID and at the Department of Defense. We work very much to make sure that our personnel understand the women, peace, and security and understand agenda and how to apply it in the context where they're working, and that we are working through across these 4 agencies to make sure that training is as comprehensive as possible, and that we also have strong metrics to measure what we're doing and to measure our own performance against, and make sure that we are hitting our marks. And Congress makes sure to keep us honest with that too by requiring regular reporting from us on these things, whether it's on training or funding and how we're doing. We constantly are reporting back to Congress and getting lots of encouragement from our friends on the Hill. So I think that I want to talk a little bit about an issue that we have been working on, that we consider it part of our women, peace, and security agenda, but it's not necessarily something that might traditionally fit within that framework. But one of the biggest challenges on the women, peace, and security agenda has been accountability. And we know that when people are held accountable for violations of human rights, that it helps to discourage those violations and helps to reduce the risk and helps to create a safer environment. We've seen this with peacekeeping operations, where when peacekeeping troops were held accountable for sexual assault and exploitation or abuses that they committed, and they were returned back to their host countries, and their host countries were not allowed to send troops to participate in peacekeeping, we've seen a dramatic improvement in the performance of peacekeepers, especially around some of these issues that had been highly problematic in the past. So we see how important it is to hold for accountability to be built into what we're doing with women, peace, and security. We also do this with investigations of atrocities, such as the situation in Syria or the atrocities committed in Burma against the Rohingya. And we've worked very hard with both bilateral allies as well as through multilateral cooperation on issues such as the investigative mechanisms that the UN has stood up to investigate these crimes. And we work closely with those organizations and with our colleagues here at the State Department that are also engaged with those organizations. So we know the importance of accountability. One of the biggest challenges, though, is when you have a country that is committing abuses, and they're committing the abuses internally, and the mechanisms for accountability are very hard to access. we face such a challenge today with the People's Republic of China and the abuses that are happening, particularly those targeting minorities such as the Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities and religious minorities, especially in Western China. We are deeply concerned with what's happening there and about how we can use the tools of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda and other tools that we have here to make sure that there is accountability around what is happening and that we are not letting China off the hook in any way. We've worked very closely with our colleagues here at the State Department as well as at the Treasury Department to ensure that we, the United States, are sanctioning entities in China that are perpetuating, whether it's forced labor or sexual violence against women and girls, forced population control that's taking place in Xinjiang, and other abuses that we see as very threatening. We know that as the countries that deny and abuse the rights of their own citizens, particularly women, do not make good partners, and they tend to spread their destabilizing influence around the world. And so we are working very hard to bring attention to the challenges that we're facing from the abuses that China is committing and the implications of those abuses beyond China's borders. So with that, I would like to wrap up and say I feel like the United States continues to lead on these issues of women, peace, and security. They're important issues for us. I've been honored to be able to represent the United States at the UN and talk about these issues in the Security Council, as was previously mentioned. But I think that if I can say one more thing that I think is really important, it's that and an idea that we feel very strongly about imparting through our work on women, peace, and security is that it's not just for women. And we work really hard to make sure that we are bringing our male colleagues and male leaders into the discussion around women, peace, and security. I think that, for a long time, whenever we have a problem that involves men with guns, we look at men with guns for the solutions. And that's probably not the best way to go about things. And getting all of us to understand that it is important to have women's voices at the table when these decisions about security, about national security, about local security are being made, that this is something that's in our own national security interest. Our president has recognized that with the legislation and the strategies that the White House has produced, and we've seen it in our own national security strategy. And so we are proud to continue working across these things and helping to support America's security by promoting women, peace, and security. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to answering questions and hearing from you about these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador Currie. It's Maggie. It's great to see you in person because we have been only chatting over the phone during this pandemic. I will say your remarks were great because you covered a lot of my questions that I already had, but I will ask you probably to expand on some of the things that you touched on. So obviously you've been very busy this month with the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, or WPS for short. So if you could identify one or two major accomplishments that have been made in the last 20 years when it comes to the role of women in prevention and resolution of conflicts.
Sure. I think that one of the biggest accomplishments, and we enshrined this with UNSCR 1820, I believe, when I think that there was, for a long time, it was kind of accepted that sexual assault and violence were the natural and unavoidable consequence of conflict. And a big part of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda has been to reject that as an acceptable idea, and to say that no, there are things you can do to reduce and eliminate the risks and actual sexual violence and the use of sexual violence as a tactic of war, and that those things can be done if there is political will and if the structures and institutions and incentives are in place to do them. And so I think that shift in thinking has been one of the biggest accomplishments of the whole project around women, peace, and security, is this idea that this is not, the whole boys will be boys idea has just is an idea that's been rejected and no longer holds water as a legitimate idea that people use to excuse behavior that should not have ever been excused. So I think that's one thing. I think also, as I mentioned before, looking at the performance of peacekeeping and how this used to be a fairly regular problem with peacekeepers themselves, using their positions of power and influence during peacekeeping operations to take advantage of vulnerable populations, including through sexual abuse and exploitation. And we have, while it certainly hasn't gone away completely, I think that the reforms that have been at the core of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda and the recognition that has been at the core of it has dramatically reduced the incidence to the point where we actually today are facing a bigger problem in the humanitarian response space, not in the armed on the armed peacekeeping side, on the security side, with sexual exploitation and assault of vulnerable populations, because we've done such a good job focusing, I think, on the power imbalances and the risks attendant to the peacekeeping operations, that we haven't done as well when it comes to the power imbalances that are there when it comes to the humanitarian side of the equation, that's often working hand in glove with these peacekeeping troops. And so we now are looking to apply some of the great lessons that we've learned on peacekeeping, including about accountability. I'm not kidding that the ability of the UN to bounce peacekeepers right out of a context if they're caught doing something that, whether it's abuse and exploitation or any other form of corruption, being able to remove them quickly and without a whole lot of process involved has been critical to making everybody understand that this is serious and that there are meaningful consequences. And so we've got to apply those lessons across the whole humanitarian response as well.
Great. And then the kind of on the opposite end, it's been 20 years. What have we failed at when it comes to implementing 1325? What can we do better? What can we improve in the next 20 years?
Well, I think there's still too much of a tendency, as I said before, to look to the men with guns who caused the problems for the solutions. And I think that we still have a long ways to go in terms of making sure that women are really given, and not just women, but the people who are most affected by conflict, the voice that they deserve in developing solutions and in coming up with meaningful security responses. I think that we continue to fall short in terms of women's participation. We're now up to 5% of women with women's participation overall across all peacekeeping and security missions, which is, again, just from the past 3 years, it's been a 50% increase from 3.5% to 5%, but that's still really, really poor. And we need to do a better job on that. We are very committed to that through our peacekeeping training initiatives with our partners. And I just read this morning that we've trained more than 8,000 women peacekeepers through our global partnership on peacekeeping training center here in the United States. And so I know that we can do it. We've just got to increase the pipeline and get more countries to do the things that are necessary to deploy more women. But we're seeing a huge improvement. We've now got all female peacekeeping contingents going out from different countries, and all female units being deployed in both civilian police situations as well as in combat units. So it's it's a slow and painful process, but I would say those are the two areas where we really need to keep working and trying to find better solutions.
That's great. And on the Global Peace Operations Initiative, I believe, GPOI, we love using that acronyms at the State Department. That was something that I wasn't as familiar with until I worked for Ambassador Haley, then obviously here in Congress. Can you explain a little bit how GPOI is above our normal peacekeeping contributions and kind of, what it is? Because other countries don't do that. Only the United States does this.
No, we are unique in this capacity, and I would really have to defer to our colleagues here in the Political Military Bureau who run GPOI and who do a great job of that. But essentially what it is it's just a very high standard training operation where we work with partners, with troop contributing countries that have to meet certain standards in order to have access to the training. And then it's just a very vigorous curriculum that we deploy where they basically get the same kind of training that U.S. military personnel get and would get if they were being deployed as overseas peacekeepers. And so it's extremely high standard training. We hold our partners to a very high standard to even be given access. But it's been a phenomenally successful partnership program that we do through the selection process comes through the State Department, but we work with DoD very closely on the curriculum and the actual training and work with our national defense universities and all of the different combatant commands to help identify and develop these resources. So it's just a great initiative that we've had in place, and we've seen tremendous success from it. And I know that, for instance, the countries that have participated in GPOI have had the deployment of women as part of their deployments has increased exponentially as compared to non-GPOI countries. I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but it is an area where we've seen like a just massive differential between on just that one indicator.
Great, thank you. I want to turn to one of the countries that I know that you've been working on a lot lately, Afghanistan, and in particular, the peace process in Afghanistan. There's been, a lot of discussion about women participation in the peace process. So I kind of want to hear how your office and the USG has been working through the Afghan peace process and to promote the voices of women in that process.
Well, this whole process is really about our belief that the future of Afghanistan has to be decided by the people of Afghanistan. And by that, we mean all the people of Afghanistan, including the women of Afghanistan. And we believe that we have made very clear to all of the parties and all of the institutions involved that we are watching the situation very closely, and that the future of the United States relationship with Afghanistan will be determined by the choices that come out of these negotiations. We support a sovereign, unified, democratic, and plural, inclusive Afghanistan that upholds the dignity and human rights of all of its people, whether it's women or ethnic and religious minorities. And so this is really critical for us. We want an Afghanistan that's at peace with itself and its neighbors and is not a source of instability in the region as well. And all of those things, again, come back to the ability of all the citizens of Afghanistan to participate and to develop a system where political issues are resolved through political means and not through violence and not through terror and intimidation. And so this has been obviously a multi-decade project, and we've not done a great job in the past of giving of creating an environment where the Afghan people themselves could develop structures and rules of the road that they had great buy-in to. One of the mistakes that I think we've made in the past is trying to impose solutions on Afghanistan that did not have buy-in from the Afghan people. And whenever we've seen this in other contexts as well, when you try to impose solutions from outside that don't have local buy-in, you generally are not going to get very far. And so we've spent the past 20 years investing in the people of Afghanistan including and especially in the women and girls of Afghanistan. And we're seeing the fruits of those investment with the strong women leaders who have come forward to speak out and to make sure that the rights that they enjoy today and that they aspire to enjoy are secured and protected by whatever solution and whatever resolution comes out of these talks. But we firmly believe that this is the best opportunity in a generation for the Afghan people to set a course for their own future that will be largely free of violence and will allow the country to stand on its own feet without having to rely on the United States as the guarantor of its security internally or externally. And but we know that, even before the Taliban, Afghanistan was not a great place for women. Today, rural Afghanistan is not a great place for women. Women leaders face incredible threats, and including, we have a great friend of our office who we honored this past March with the International Women of Courage Award. And her name is Zarifa Ghaffari. She's a mayor of a town in Wardak province, which is an area that the Taliban still has quite a bit of sway outside of towns. And she's the mayor of a town called Maidan Shar. She just survived her 6th assassination attempt last month. And, when I talked to Zarifa, to Mayor Ghaffari, her resilience, her strength, her continued willingness to just keep going to work every day in an armored car, knowing that, people are trying to kill her on her way to work every day, is what inspires us to keep doing everything we can to support the women of Afghanistan and their aspirations. So we will keep providing them with the training, the resources, the rhetorical support, the political support that they need. At the end of the day, they've got to take those final steps, and they've got to have their male colleagues standing beside them, also advocating on their behalf. And we're really pleased to see that that is what is in fact happening within the negotiations, that the leadership across the board has stepped up and insisted that many of these demands that the women are making are not really negotiable in their minds. So it's actually, for all of the challenges and difficulties that we see, and there are many, and I don't want to downplay or sugarcoat them, but I see tremendous hope and promise in the strength and the resilience of the Afghan women who are leading this process.
Great. And I'm going to do one more question from me before we turn to the students. So if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. And I'm going to zoom out again. So one of the largest challenges to promoting women, peace, and security is data. And you touched on this a little bit in your opening remarks. So how is the U.S. government working to improve gender disaggregated data? How are we getting this information so we can measure change when it comes to having women involved?
It is a challenge, especially because in fragile and conflict affected states, getting data, period, is often a huge challenge. And then getting gender disaggregated data is even more challenging. COVID has made it more difficult because a lot of the tools that we relied on to be able to access women and vulnerable populations have been shut down. And we're much more reliant on digital means. And given the digital divide that exists with women, especially in the developing world, it does add another layer of complexity. One thing that I will say is that we are committed together with other countries to addressing these issues. And so there is a recognition that this is a problem and that we need to do more about it. I know, for instance, that in the UN space, there's been a renewed commitment on data collection and on making sure that we are getting gender disaggregated data as part of many across multiple vectors, whether it's development or conflict related. But we are working internally also to make sure that one of the things that's been great about the Women, Peace, and Security Act and about the interagency cooperation and the White House leadership is an emphasis on having metrics that are measurable across the different agencies that are working on this this agenda, and so that we're not doing things in a disjointed way or measuring different things in different ways, but that we're comparing apples to apples. And so we've been working really hard with the National Security Council and with our other agencies to develop a set of metrics and deliver and indicators and data calls that are able to help us better understand what we're doing. We continue to refine those and continue to work on them, but I know we've got a data call coming together right now that will probably hit Maggie's desk in the next couple of weeks up on the Hill, because the NSC is pushing us to get this information out and make sure that we're tracking things in a better way. And I think that a lot of it is about awareness raising and making sure that as the different parts of the State Department are doing things in the field, that they are thinking to themselves, okay, we need to make sure that we are collecting this data in a certain way. And so we do a lot of work with the other offices and the department that have programs that they manage. And then USAID does a great job on this too. They're much, they're much more integrated across their different platforms for collecting data. So we're trying to learn from some of their tools that they've put forward and share information and learning across those things. And that may be the only time I ever will say that USAID is better at something than we are.
Well, this is being recorded, so I'll be sure to send it over.
Don't tell them I said that.
Well, thank you. Now we're going to turn to questions from students. So some have put them in the chat already. I'm going to give them the opportunity to actually ask them to you. But first, Bennett, you put 3 great questions, but can you only ask one, please, in order for us to let your fellow students. So Bennett, if you would like to ask one of your questions, please unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. All right. First, I would like to preface by saying thank you for coming and speaking. I know right now is a very busy time, a very difficult time. And so I, as well as probably all of my colleagues and staff here, like to thank you, and I'm sure you'll get thanked a lot more. But so you, as an appointed advocate of women's rights, have you used your position to advocate for women's rights, such as those listed in the proposed Equal Rights Amendment? And do you see any inconsistencies between the sort of policies that America operates with internally in this field of discussion, as opposed to what we tend to advocate for on the international and geopolitical sphere?
Well, I think that, I, as a woman who's grown up in the United States and who has seen things change over the past 25 years, 30 years, 40 years of my life, I do feel like women in this country have pretty much unlimited opportunity. And we are very fortunate to live in this country. And I have an 11-year-old daughter. And I look at my daughter and I know that she feels like she can do anything she wants. And that, gives me a lot of confidence that we are doing something right here. And while by no means perfect, and there still are things that we continue to work on to make our country a more perfect union and to make sure that everybody in this country enjoys the same rights and is able to have access to the same opportunities. And all of the things that we do strive toward with our aspirations. I think that the baseline set of values and principles that we both adhere to and try to work with our partners on are very, I don't see any real conflict there. What we talk with our partners primarily about is that I get very strong support from my political leadership. I will tell you this. One of the strongest messages that we see is that societies that empower women and give them the ability to fully and freely participate in all aspects of life are more successful, more peaceful, more prosperous. The data is there. You just all you have to, and you don't even need to look at the data. You just need to look around the world and see the countries that are most, successful by pretty much any measure are those countries where women are able to fully and freely participate and make their own choices about what their lives are going to be like and build their own futures. And the countries that are suffering from instability, poverty, and in the bottom, third of indicators, social, economic, conflict, you name it, are countries, they tend to be countries where women's rights are not respected and not enjoyed. So a lot of times, you have to tailor your argument to the audience. And so when I'm talking to finance ministers or to countries that where democracy is not yet taken place and flourishing, we talk a lot about the economic value of having women able to fully participate in the economy, and that they are holding their own countries back in terms of development, and that they're not, that they're hurting themselves and their own stability by not fully empowering women. And then in other contexts, it's more straightforward about, we need to work on issues around gender-based violence because there's an epidemic of gender-based violence in certain communities that we work with. And again, we still have gender-based violence problems here in the United States that we're continuing to work with. One of the things that we really emphasize is the importance of learning from each other. And I'll give you another example of this with, I don't think that most people would think of the United Arab Emirates as a country that is at the forefront of advancing women's rights. But I will tell you that the UAE has a better track record on women in STEM, and not just at the university level, but career-wise than the United States does. And so we're like, how are you doing this, UAE? What is it that's allowing you to get more women involved in STEM careers, and how can we learn from that? At the same time, they're coming to us and saying, as we get more women in the workforce, we're facing challenges that domestic violence has increased in our society. What do we need to be doing about that? And so there's a lot of learning from one another, and taking countries where they are, and when they show the will to change and the will to make the kinds of changes that we would like to see them make to level up with women's rights, then we're all in with them, and we try to work with them. It's the countries that really either think they don't have a problem or aren't willing to talk about it. Those are the problem countries, really, at the end of the day, and those are the ones where no amount of encouragement from us is going to really change that. But they've got to. So I think that's, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ambassador Currie. Now we're going to turn to Nicole, who has a question not about women in STEM, but women in foreign policy.
Thank you for joining us today, Ambassador Currie. My question is very straight to the point and very simple, although the answer might be anything but. But what advice do you have for young women looking to pursue a career in foreign policy? How would you advise us to stand out in a sea of applicants?
I'm terrible at these questions because my path to my job was so weird and circuitous that I don't I don't really know that I am the best person to give advice. But I will say that I have never stopped learning. I've always tried to take jobs that challenge me, and to try to do things to be a little bit uncomfortable all the time. I think that that's part of it, is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you will be uncomfortable a lot. I've gone, though, I have to say, when I started out in this field out of university, I was often the only woman in the room. That doesn't happen as often now. There are still certain areas where it happens, but it doesn't happen as often. Some of the most impressive women I've met here in the State Department and in other contexts spent some time in the military. I feel like if I had to go back and do one thing over, it would probably be to have done something, to have taken time to do that, because I do feel like it does give you a really interesting perspective on our foreign policy and national security challenges. And it does, it teaches you some really great skills as well in terms of leadership and the other thing that I regret not doing is, or not taking more seriously, is language studies and being able to, and being a better linguist. I'm terrible about languages. And then just get out there, travel, see the world, get out there and figure out what excites you about these things. Because I find that one of the most frequently commented things when I'm doing events is people tell me, oh, I can really tell you're passionate about what you're doing because it just comes through. And it's true. I am really, I get excited about what I'm doing, and I get excited to come to work every day because I get to work on things that I really love. And when you find those things that you really love to do that really get you excited and get you out of bed in the morning, and because you're going to face a lot of challenges and difficulties, and you're going to fail, and things are not going to go the way you expect them to, that desire to come back and do things because you really love what you're doing helps you get through those tough times. So I would definitely, I know it seems like a very cliche thing to say, but it is important that you do have a passion for what you're doing.
Great. Thanks, Ambassador Currie. I know you only have 5 more minutes. So right? I know time flies when you're enjoying doing your job. So we'll turn to the next question. Ahmed, if you want to.
Oh, can I say one more thing about that last question? Find good mentors. Have a good squad around you of people who support you and help you and will pull for you and will pull you up when you need to be pulled up. That's really important.
Agreed.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm currently interning at the State Department to integrate the WPS into the Red Sea strategy. And my question essentially is, how do you take an issue, a women's issue, and you mix it into this broad policy that you might have for a specific country? Right now, for example, I'm focusing in on Saudi Arabia and Sudan. And I look at a country like Saudi Arabia, very top down, and I've seen that the US is able to encourage them to do certain things from the top down. But the other countries, Sudan, how do you put your foot into the door with an issue related to women and say, this is good for the broader policy that the State Department has towards Sudan from your role?
Yeah, so actually these are 2 great countries that we are working with on a number of different issues, and so it's I can help you with this actually, and we can keep talking offline because these are both very important places where we work with all of our 2 main initiatives, both the women's economic empowerment and the WPS agenda. With the Saudis, women's economic empowerment has been the real wedge for us to be able to work with them on women's issues because they are very enthusiastic about changing their own society in this way. And it's part of the broader reform agenda of the leadership. But we also, see it in more grassroots ways. And we still have lots of challenges, obviously, with the Saudis, and we still have to continue to go in and talk to them about detention issues and about detention, including of women activists, and the need to allow more political space for women to do these things, that it's not enough to just have the top-down directives coming from the leadership, but that they have to allow women to be able to organize and to be able to advocate on behalf of their own rights, and that this is important. So we're working it on both ends with the Saudis, and hoping to continue to support them as they try to find the way forward. And because I had a very interesting conversation with their ambassador to the United States a few months ago, where she's like, look, we can't go backwards. We have to go forwards. It's the only way ahead, is the only way for us with women. And so, we're looking for help, and we're looking for guidance on both very specific and very broad areas there. So, like I said, when you have a country that wants to change, that's when you really need to lean in with them and help them find that path forward. With Sudan, the opportunities right now are incredible because of the recent changes there as well. we are working directly with Sudanese civil society, women's civil society, and the revolution in Sudan was led by women. So the case there is a slam dunk in my perspective. They've got some great women in their cabinet, but they've also got tremendous women working at the grassroots level. Really critical there in Sudan is going to be accountability as well, and making women part of the accountability discussion is very, very important. But just making sure that the changes that are taking place across Sudanese society today, whether it's working on the peace processes that are underway, or the whole restructuring of the political system, it's really women are demanding a seat at the table in Sudan. It's really up to us not to shut off the pathways for them by only looking for solutions in traditional ways. I do worry a little bit about our Sudan policy sometimes, that we are, talking to two or three guys at the top and not thinking more holistically about how we engage Sudanese society. But our office is very much working on that. And you've got a great team there in NEA. I know working that one of our best partners on women, peace, and security is the Near East Asia Bureau that covers this, and so we have enthusiastic partners there, and you've got great leadership there with Assistant Secretary Shanker, and I'm thinking who is it, Dr. Valerie Badgley, that's in your office also?
I think she's higher up. I directly speak to Marcy Hodge and Beth. Elizabeth Hanley.
Yeah, so those are two members of my team, and I'm glad you're working with them because they can point you directly toward the resources that you need. But you've also got great leadership in the regional bureau for the Near East Asia Bureau. They are very excited about this. And in Sudan, our Africa Bureau has been really, really helpful and supportive of our engagement on women's issues, because they see the value there, and they recognize that Sudan's revolution was powered by women, and how critical they were to the changes that have taken place, the dramatic changes in Sudan. I was just there about a year ago, and it was just incredible to meet with the women from all sectors of society who are involved in pushing for change in Sudan. It's a really inspiring place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Currie. I'm going to turn it over to Dean Smith to close us out.
So
bye, Maggie.
Thank you both for a wonderful opening remarks, conversation between the two of you, and then also with our students. I began my opening remarks with a full circle moment in talking about, the trajectory of our students to our alumni and then on to the ambassador level. But it's great to end with a question from a student that's actually interning in an office that's working with you. There's so many moments to be proud of our students, and this was one of them. I was just connecting with a faculty member who is teaching a course focused on international security, and had a guest from NATO speaking today, and said that the students really did us proud with their questions. And I think that's true again this evening with our questions. And Maggie doing us proud as an alumni, and Ambassador Currie doing us proud representing our country on very key issues at the UN and around the world. So thank you all for a wonderful conversation this evening. There's some really good, I'm just pointing out to all the students here, and especially the students that are in our Women of Diplomacy Leadership Program, there's some additional really good questions in the chat. The chat stays available after we close the meeting. So Sarah Marie, I would encourage you, maybe you and your fellow women in diplomacy leaders can grab some of these questions and discuss them at some of your future events, because I'm sure you have a lot of insights to share each other. So, and
feel free to send them back to us and back through our office, and we'd be delighted to get back to those who weren't able to submit their questions during this short program today.
So thank you again, Ambassador. We're very grateful for your time, and for you as well, Maggie. And for everyone else, please stay healthy and safe and have a wonderful evening. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Currie.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sarah Marie, if you're still on, I just wanted to say thank you. You did a great job.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to stay on in case you had any questions or anything like that.
I echo that completely, Sarah Marie. You did a wonderful job with the introduction, and I do think that and the number of people that attended this event is far higher than our earlier ones this semester. So I think this is a topic that's very fertile for additional conversation, and perhaps even some linkages to the anniversary of the Beijing platform as well, because I know there's a lot of dynamics around the dual anniversaries this year. So.
And I think
lot of
Sarah Marie
fertile
did a great job of helping us to recruit audience members from among her clubs. So thank you for your help in building the audience.
Yeah, that was huge. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to the next upcoming events, and I'll be sure to keep promoting that in the organization. Definitely, I think it was a great turnout. So.
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you so much, guys. See
Have a
you.
good night,
I
everybody.
hope everything's going well with you and your family, Sarah Marie, as well. We've been thinking and praying for you, so we hope everything's okay. We know it's a difficult time, but that you're accomplishing all this in such circumstances is truly remarkable.
Thank you. That means
Crushing it.
so thank you so much. I'll see you guys. Bye.
Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.